So we've got half an hour, so I'm going to ask you some questions for around 15 minutes and then open it up to the audience to see what questions people might have. So my first question is around the use of the letters, because the Edmund de Waal book on the Camondo family also uses this device. What do you think that, what is that value for you as a documentarian to address Moïse in the letter form?
I think it's perfectly done in Edmund de Waal book, and it's also something that I wanted to use in general in my films. It's the first time I use this narrative device, but it constructs a bridge between past and present, and there is a lot of my work is. And in my previous films too, I try to give a shape to the notion of interval of time. I'm not interested in pretending that I'm in the past. I'm in the present. I'm watching this from my perspective in 2024, whatever. And so for me, it's also a way to give form to this notion of interval, which is very important to me as far as our relationship to the past is concerned.
And this relationship to the past fascinates me in the film in terms of the people in the film and their relationship to a past that they reconstruct with their house, with the house. I wondered if you could talk about what do you think that history is. You say very clearly in the film that the history is to be assimilated. But I'm wondering whether there's something more fundamental about myths of origins, about fantasies of a past that is materially created.
In the Camondo,
yes,
among the Camondo family.
And we were talking also about the extraordinary Jewish houses, the one in the south of France, the Reinach house, which is built like a...
Kyrillos.
Yeah, which is like a Greek, relationship to Greek ideas. I think it's this question around what, could you talk more beyond what you say in the film about this, not just simply in terms of assimilation, but something more universal in terms of a human history that we seek to bring back into our present?
Well, I think that it's... when I quote Whitman at one point in the film, one contains a multitude. And it's true for... so I think that it's obvious, for instance, with the Camondo and maybe with people who comes from different culture. And so they can't be... Of course, you have this process. They really much try to follow an assimilation path, but at the same time, of course, there is something far more ambivalent and far more I don't know,
creative, even imaginative.
Exactly, creative about this, and the question of multiple identities.
Yes,
and of course, I think it's not only Jewish families who have this kind of imaginative relationship towards identity. But I think that this is something very important, and that's what the curator at the Museum d'Orsay says about Isaac.
Well, exactly.
Exactly. And I think, of course, that it's somebody that can be heard today. It's important that it's heard today, where we are supposed to have just one origin or one way of being into the world. I think that it's good that we have many ways to be into the world.
Because there's always the problem of where we really come from. We don't really know, any of us. This myth of origins is why religions occur, even. So it is what's interesting in the film is the backward look of Moïse into a past, and then Isaac's embracing and his philanthropy of modernity and new ways of seeing and being, and then the idea that they rebuilt the house, that Moïse rebuilt the house in order to kind of cut loose from his own immediate past of his parents, is what you were saying when we were speaking earlier. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that, the house before.
Yeah, the house before, I don't mention it in the film, but the house before, where they settled in 1870, in fact, is described very precisely in a Zola book, which is called L'Argent, the money. And so it was it was a Napoleon III mansion, and very over the top, as Edmund de Val would say. And so, and actually I didn't find photographs of the inside of this house.
The previous house, yes.
But I found photographs of Salomon Béor, the uncle, the one who is at 61 Rue de Monceau, and it's absolutely extraordinary pictures of how they used to live. I mean, it's quite amazing.
I'm sort of fascinated by that, the ghost of what we don't see, of the house that's gone.
Of course, it's a bit the story of this film, and it's a bit the story of the Camondos, that you have
The stratas, yeah.
Stratas of houses. I mean, houses embody, of course, give shape once again to the strata of time. So that's what is very interesting here, and that's what I tried to do with a film.
And I think you do that beautifully in a visual palimpsest when you project the mosque. Where is that mosque? Is that the image? It looks like a mosque. It looks like something.
Yes, it's on Sophie.
Okay.
Yes, it's it's in Istanbul.
It's in Istanbul. Sorry, I'm not been to Istanbul.
Oh yeah, but there is inside of the synagogue.
Yes.
No, this is inside. This is a synagogue.
Yes.
No.
I mean, sorry, synagogue.
Yeah, it was a synagogue.
I'm getting confused.
Well, it's an empty synagogue.
Yes.
In Istanbul, in the Galata, in the very area where they lived. And it's very impressive. The first time I went into this synagogue, it was, of course, empty, but I don't know, maybe there had been an exhibition or something, but there were only some pictures, black and white pictures of Turkish Jewish families, you know, and it was very beautiful. But when I came back to shoot, it was all empty. And it's one of the synagogues where they used to go, but they founded other synagogues. I mean, but this one is particularly beautiful.
And as a filmmaker, the relationship between history, there's so much information in the film, the relationship between writing a book or writing and what you can't bring into a film. Like we were talking earlier also about this, the different strands that you could go on and how you needed to contain this. And Moïse is the sort of central person that you have, you and Edmund de Val, I don't know any people here who've read the book, have this intense contact with Moïse and his tragedy across his whole life, really. I wondered whether, the woman who is the curator says, I know them better than my family, they've become extremely dear to me. This intimacy, being haunted by these people, how do you feel about that as you continue on? Or what's the purpose of history for us in terms of these relationships with people from the past?
Well, I was very happy that there were some books written, because I didn't have to mind, because I knew that people could go and read the books. So I could do whatever I wanted and not write the books myself, for instance. And for me, Pierre Assouline or Edmund de Val or Sophie Degnaud-Le Tarnec that you see, and who's the wonderful, wonderful curator of this museum. To me, when I started to imagine the film, they were the imaginary family for me. There were people, who were turning and projecting things about the Camondo. Of course, they are projecting things which are quite accurate, but also with their own, with their own experience. I mean, Sophie comes from a very different background than Edmund or Pierre Assouline or myself. And so we all project things. So at the same time, I guess, I'm trying to be rigorous and to have and to have a look in the archives and to treat it very accurately. But at the same time, I think that each of us were like, we are like, 5 grandchildren, great-grandchildren thinking about, an imaginary family. And for me, they are the imaginary family of the Camondos. So that's how I conceived the film.
Yes, well, that's fascinating that you've. Because when I look at those rooms, I think, what would I feel going into those rooms? And in fact, Diane Grabiziak, who is programming the French Institute here, was saying that when she'd gone into the rooms, she felt like it's kind of claustrophobic, and you don't feel it's history, you feel it's a sort of organized hoarding, you feel the tragedy of that. Do you have that experience of when you go there into the Camondo house physically as opposed to?
I don't know, because I've been there very often and for a very long time. So it's difficult to remember what my first feeling were when I first went there. I was very young. And
how old were you when you first went in?
I think something like 15 years old. I was going to high school really close, and it's true. I was going to the Parc Monceau when I was a kid.
Yes, well, I wanted to ask you, how has Paris changed as you make these films that are kind of forensic analysis of these various buildings? Does Paris itself change for you, or how did you?
Oh, Paris changes a lot, but La Plaine Monceau is not changing, and that is what is crazy about it. It's still, it's like, it's like an Atlantid. But an Atlantid which is not behind the sea, but it's still there. I mean, nothing changed there. Nothing changed.
When you say that, reminds me of this feeling of the desire for permanence.
Yeah.
That we have as humans, and the kind of sense of the impossibility of permanence.
Yes, of course.
And Abraham Salomon's tomb there, just a ruin, and this kind of wrestle with permanence and time.
I think it's I think it's something that any human has this tension between impermanence and the feeling of wanting a home or a place to to have roots. And of course, this is a particular question for the Jewish people.
Sure.
So it embodies particularly in the Jewish history, and I think in the French Jewish history, this notion of being from a place, in a place, and that is a question I've dealt with this question a lot, actually, because I'm French, but I could have been English, for instance. I mean, my grandparents chose to come to France, but it could have been something else. So this notion of something random and at the same time so strong, because I think I'm very French. I mean, I love literature, so and I love French literature. So I mean, language is my home. But I think this tension of being from a place and with so many roots as friends. I don't know if I'm clear now. I'm sorry for my English. But I think it's a big question for me, and that's what I projected, of course, on the Camondos, which are coming from a very different planet from where I come from.
Well, I think it's, there's the pleasure of roaming back in time and roaming back in place, and this question of history in material objects. Which is what Edmond de Waal is so fascinated by.
Absolutely. I admire his work so much, and when I read the Hair with Amber Eyes, I couldn't believe that, that somebody, and not French, could write something so accurate, for instance, about Charlie Froussy from La Gazette des Beaux-Arts and his Proustian, but La Plaine Monceau and everything, and it's so subtle. And of course, what really Edmund brings is this attention to material culture and to things, as he says in the film, as witnesses. But he takes this so seriously because also he speaks with his head, but also with his hands. To me, maybe I speak with my head and my heart, but not my hands. So it was very interesting for me to have somebody who takes things so seriously, far more seriously than I would take them myself, for instance.
You take words. I mean, words is, you said, your home.
Yes.
Language.
Yes, language, yes. But things, it's more complicated. So
you said before the screening how today's world is, there's lessons to learn from this in today's world. I mean, one of the things that I wish is that we had an Isaac de Camondo to be a philanthropist for the arts, as we've been abandoned by all the state mechanisms, or they've been hijacked by new political agendas. That's one thing, not to mention the wars that are going on in the world. I wonder whether you could talk about how you feel this film relates to that.
It's a small film. I don't pretend to fight to fight the terrible state of the world with such a film. But as far, I've got small. First of all, of course, I think that with films we can do things, and we have to do things in the future. It's a combat arm. It's a weapon. So I think we can use films. But in this film, it was a it was a very small goal. It was, and it has been done, of course, thanks to Pierre Assouline, who wrote this book, and Edmund Deval before me. I don't pretend to be an innovator in this. But only that people can realize what is behind this house, or what is behind those Monet or Degas that they are seeing at the Musée d'Orsay. Just that this family name should be known, and we're talking. But maybe we could say thank you. I hear that it's in the air now that we have to say thank you to people.
Yes.
But maybe that there is a notion of gratitude, and so.
Well, I feel very affected by this kind of reach for universalism that Isaac was interested in, and I feel that is lost in the. You know, you talk about his kind of play with identities, and the role play even to make the house, or for you to be the ghosts in the house. This kind of playfulness where we don't get so tightly anchored into questions of identity, which are you know, they could be ethnic or religious, but after that we are all human, and that's, I think, a mark for a lot of Jewish heritage, secular Jewish heritage, is a reach for universalism.
It's a reach for universalism. The problem is that not everybody around them does agree with this universalism, or do consider them as universalist, as you know. And maybe this is the problem of anti-Semitism. So, yes, you know, universalism, but at the end, you're only dirty Jew in Drancy. So I don't know. I mean,
yes,
it's a question mark.
It's shattering that this, you know, this violence, this historical violence that, you know, should never, ever, ever be forgotten. And it's a reflection of human violence as such, which, you know, I do think your film, this one and Les Enfants de Rue Saint-Maur, reminds us of this, and I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you for making these films.
Thank you.
Let's ask some people. Anyone here who would like to ask a question, please put your hand up, and you will have a microphone.
Thank you very much. It was really thank you so very much for the film. I really enjoyed it. I read quite a lot about the Camondo family. What brought you to do it? What made you want to make the film?
I did this film about, you know, building in Paris, a poor building, a building for poor people. So I wanted to do the same for the rich. So it's a part of a reflection I have about also a kind of reflection about the persecution of a French Jewry during the the Second World War. And so, and as I said, I have this very special link to the Plaine Monceau and to what it represents. So there are many things that brought me to the Camondos, many things. But also, of course, Edmund Deval. But many things of different, you know, very different, historical, sensitive, and so there are many things.
Another question? Yes, there's a.
Congratulations, that was beautiful, very moving. I wanted to ask, I know Deval writes about.
To the microphone, yes, so that everyone can hear you.
I started off saying congratulations, that was really beautiful and incredibly moving. I wanted to ask, Deval writes about this a bit, but this particular 18th century aesthetic that they were so drawn to, I wondered what you made of that. It's a very specific kind of time period for people to collect and be interested in. And what do you think the roots of that appeal was?
First of all, of course, as Alice Léger, who is a very fine historian, says, of course, at the end of the 19th century, everybody in the aristocracy, in the aristocratic world or in the high bourgeoisie was collecting 18th century. So there were no, because you know, it was beginning of, because people had left, for instance, for England, for immigrants, I mean, aristocrats, and so they came back to France, and then they started to put, of course, things on the art market. So, you know, it was not so original to collect 18th century. But as she says, 18th century coming from a Jewish family and coming from a foreigner Jewish family, and with this goal of assimilation, it means something. It's a self-portrait. So it's not very original to collect 18th century at the end of the 19th century or at the beginning of the 20th century, but it's got a political and an existential signification, and that's what I was trying to underline in this film.
I always wondered if there wasn't some kind of strange, paradoxical link to the French Revolution, that there's this resuscitation of an idea of an aristocracy.
Of course, because and that's why also Drummond, you know, Drummond was antiquaire. You know, how do you say?
That's one of those French words.
How do you say that?
Oh, antiquarian, antiquaire, okay.
Yeah,
Antiquarian.
he was a specialist he was in objects. And so it's very interesting that really the basis of his first articles were on those objects. And of course, the 18th century, at the end of the 19th century, can convey also a sense, as you know, it's the beginning of the Third Republic, which means that, you know, the Third Republic, there are still a lot of counter-revolution among the parties against the Third Republic. So, of course, it's got a political signification too. So, but you know, I'm sorry, but it's true. It's a very deep historical subject. I mean, as what the collecting 18th century means, collecting 18th century objects for Jewish people means, how it is used by somebody like Drummond, because it's really the basis, one of the bases of his anti-Semitism. And there is another book here that we didn't mention, but that I'd like to mention, which is a very good book, and it's written by an American. It's a James Macaulay. Maybe some of you might have read it, The House of Fragile Things, where he's doing a very, I think, subtle and very interesting analysis of this. So
there's also the question of collections, even the creating of collections. There's now, with digitization, you know, questions around, should we keep collecting? You know, what is the collecting about? It's a sort of,
well, it can be a self-portrait, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting.
It's a huge question. What collection means? Yes.
Yeah. Because yes. Would you like to ask a question? Could you give a microphone to this gentleman? Thank you. One. Okay.
Congratulations. I come from Turkey, actually, from a Sephardic background also. It's really funny that they try to erase the Ladino contact.
Yeah.
I mean, and with the Alliance Israelite, the Jews in Turkey, Ladino was kind of for poorer Jews, and through Alliance Israelite, French became the language of aristocracy in the Jewish community.
But the women were. It's very hard to know, but there are some archives that say that the women in the Camondo family were speaking Ladino.
Still.
Yeah. But for instance, the two brothers, Nissim, I mean the father of Moïse de Camondo and his brother were writing to each other in French, and of course French was the language of the elite, as it was thanks to the Alliance Israelite, as you know.
As if they were rejecting their background of Turkish Jewry and Spanish Jewry as well. I mean, why not continuing with Spanish?
I think it was where they had moved to, becoming part of France.
Oh, yes, but as you know, language is a distinction. It's a way of being distinct from the others. And as you know, they really, they belong to really the elite of the Turkish Jewry. So they spoke French, but it's certainly the great-grandfather spoke Hebrew and Ladino.
I'm really sorry, but Ruth has to catch a train, get back home.
To the Camondo Museum.
Back to the Camondo, to haunt it, and to contact Moïse.
I've got a little bed there.
Not in the archive room, I hope. Get something much more grand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you again to the French Institute for hosting this wonderful event, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you very much.